The grand chamber of the Galactic Council was built to impress. Columns curved upward like the ribs of a leviathan, ceiling encrusted with phosphorescent stone that shimmered with pale violet light. Delegates from over 60 species filled the lower tiers, their hover thrones arranged in concentric circles around a wide, silent stage. It was a room meant for power, built to intimidate lesser races and flatter the pride of empires. And in the center of that grandeur, sipping tea from a dainty porcelain cup, sat Earth's representative, Mr. Elias Caldwell. He adjusted his cuffs as a six-armed bureaucrat from the Krelt Dominion sputtered through the current topic, mining permits on asteroid belt 17K. Caldwell didn't interrupt. He didn't lean forward. He simply smiled. It was the sort of smile that revealed nothing, just the right amount of warmth to be polite, just enough ambiguity to be mistaken for harmless. The Jarek delegate, High Talon Varus, scoffed from across the room. A towering insectoid draped in ceremonial bone armor, he had not stopped sneering since the human sat down. "We waste valuable sessions listening to primitives," Varus buzzed, his mandibles twitching. "Their planet isn't even on the inner core chart. They bring us, what? Spices? Artisanal cheeses." There were chuckles, mostly from the elder empires, the ones that had risen when Earth was still flinging metal canisters into orbit. Caldwell tilted his head thoughtfully. "Well, I dare say we do have good cheese," he said, swirling his tea. "But no, sir. We bring something far more dangerous." The laughter paused. Even Varus hesitated. "And what is that?" Caldwell's smile widened, fractionally. "Curiosity." The word hung in the air like smoke, harmless on the surface, but laced with a hint of gasoline. The moderator, a gelatinous mediator species with a reputation for neutrality, coughed nervously and tapped its staff. "Let us proceed to the next matter." But the room had shifted. Slightly. Unspoken tension rippled between seats, a few glances exchanged between more cautious delegations. Because they knew what the human meant, even if they didn't want to admit it. After all, Earth had spread fast. Too fast. A species that took less than a century to go from digital memes to FTL drives? That didn't just suggest ambition, it suggested madness. Caldwell finished his tea and rose, offering a bow with just the right amount of ceremony to imply respect, and just the right amount of irreverence to insult anyone sensitive enough to catch it. "I look forward to tomorrow's talks," he said, placing the empty cup down on a nearby tray that didn't exist 30 seconds ago. "Assuming we're still talking." He exited to silence. It wasn't fear, not yet. But it was the beginning of something like it. The transport ship Silver Accord cruised above the Neuroth sector's third moon, polished hull gleaming under the twin suns. Aboard, Caldwell stood in the observation chamber, hands clasped behind his back, admiring the planetary curvature below. He wore the same expression one might reserve for admiring a Monet in a museum. His assistant, a young woman named Lyra Tan, stepped in quietly. "Transmission confirmed. Jarek Planetary Council approved the audience. They're expecting you at noon." Caldwell didn't turn. "And our side?" "General Wren has acknowledged. Code protocols stand by. Passive systems are watching." He nodded. "Then all is well." She hesitated. "Sir, are you sure you want to go alone?" He did turn this time, but gently. "My dear Miss Tan, there are two kinds of war. The loud, and the quiet. If you wish to win both, you must be willing to be seen as breakable." She frowned. "That's not in the doctrine." "Precisely," he said and walked away. The Jarek platform was carved from volcanic glass, lit by sulfurous torches and humming crystal obelisks. Their architecture was as much performance as function. Every blade-shaped spire whispered of conquest. Caldwell stepped off the shuttle wearing a crisp, ash-gray suit. No armor, no escort, just a cane that doubled as a data tool. High Talon Varus was waiting. And smiling. "Human," he said, his voice a wet rasp. "You come with no guards. No security fields. No real power." Caldwell raised a brow. "I find those who feel the need to display power usually have little of it to spare." Varus tilted his head. "So you die brave or foolish?" Interesting either way. The blow came fast. Not ceremonial. Not dramatic. Just sudden. A soldier stepped forward and drove a plasma pike through Caldwell's chest before he could finish another quip. For 3 full seconds, no one spoke. Then Varus turned to the cameras. The human attempted to smuggle a weapon. This was justified. He said it not for truth, but for history. The broadcast was transmitted to the galactic core within hours. Condemnation was minimal. Most empires shrugged. One less diplomat from a species that hadn't earned its seat yet. But Earth did not reply. No protests. No threats. Just quiet. 3 days later, in a bunker 3 kilometers beneath Earth's south pole, a woman entered a conference chamber lit only by red glow status panels. She wore a dark uniform with no markings. Her hair was tied back, and her voice was patient, like someone teaching chess to a child. Subject verified, she said. Biometrics confirmed. Caldwell executed at timestamp 47 hours 31 minutes and 2 seconds. The trigger is valid. Around her, others straightened. No gasps. No fury. Just the subtle tension of a gun being cocked. Operation Black Garden is active, she continued. Begin stage 1. Jarek trade convoys began to vanish. At first, they assumed pirates. Then, traders. Then a full squadron was found drifting. Crews unconscious, systems offline, no signs of violence. Just a message etched into the flagship hull. You killed a whisper. Now hear the scream. The council debated. But Earth said nothing. 6 days after Caldwell's execution, the new human representative arrived at the Galactic Council. She was tall, soft-spoken, and dressed in gray. No pomp. No entourage. Her name was Dr. Helena Graves. She apologized for the delay. It has taken us time, she said, to adjust. Varus scoffed again. More monkeys in suits. Graves smiled pleasantly. Indeed. Curious, aren't we? The room hushed. Earth regrets Mr. Caldwell's loss, she said. He was one of our best. But it seems diplomacy is no longer our shared language. She stepped forward, calmly placing a sealed envelope on the council podium. Our terms are simple. A full investigation into the execution. Open access to Jarek logs. Public trial of responsible parties. And if we refuse? Varus said, smug. She looked at him. Not unkindly. We'll be disappointed. A pause. And then we'll proceed. Varus hissed. With what army? Her eyes softened. Oh no. We don't need an army. She tapped the podium gently. We needed permission. Out in the dark, above systems where Earth had never claimed to be, ships began to wake. Not battleships. Not cruisers. Something quieter. Smaller. Smarter. Scout fighters built without IFF. Satellites disguised as mining drones flickered to life and aligned. Supply lines were mapped, not attacked. Yet. Just observed. Varus's private channel lit up as he left the chamber. His intelligence officer appeared, panicked. Sir, we've lost contact with stations 14 through 22. No distress calls. No trace. Varus barked. Scramble patrol wings. Hunt these humans. Show them. No, sir, the officer said, quietly. Varus paused. No? They didn't do this today. Sir, the power records show those stations were compromised, days ago. Silence. They were waiting. Back on Earth, a man entered a quiet library in Geneva. His face was new. His gait altered. But the eyes were the same. He sat down with a book, The Art of War, annotated in over 30 languages. A child passed him, glancing at the book. The man smiled, thin and sharp. Because a smile, after all, is just teeth. And Caldwell was never really gone. The Galactic Council chamber was colder now. Not in temperature, but in tone. Where once pomp and ceremony overflowed with the false warmth of civil diplomacy, now every delegate leaned forward just a bit too far, too tense, too aware. The humans weren't shouting. They weren't threatening. They were doing something worse. They were waiting. Dr. Helena Graves stood at the center of it all, composed as a cathedral. She wore charcoal gray again, tasteful, quiet, a color that didn't ask for attention but demanded it by its stillness. No ornament, no military insignia. Just a single silver brooch at her collar in the shape of a rose, half-bloomed. "I will be brief," she said, her voice echoing like polished steel against glass. "Our late envoy, Elias Caldwell, was executed without trial, without defense, and, by your own laws, without cause." She held up a crystalline data shard. "We have evidence. Transcripts. Footage. Sensor logs. Jarek internal communications. A war crime, broadcast as spectacle." Varus shifted in his hover throne, wings clicking with irritation. "The Jarek hold no trial for spies." "Then perhaps," Graves replied gently, "you shouldn't host diplomats at gallows." A flicker of restrained laughter rippled across a few rows of the chamber. Not from allies, but from the old neutral empires, the ones who had seen enough wars to recognize the sound of a blade being sharpened. Varus leaned forward. "You ask for recompense?" Graves smiled. "No. We offered that. You declined." She placed the crystal on the council dais and stepped back. "We are not here to plead," she continued, "nor to trade threats. Earth has made its final request." "And if the council votes against your demands?" asked the Silurian Archon, voice smooth and serpentine. "Then Earth will express its disappointment," Graves replied. The silence was painful. Even the gelatinous moderator hesitated. Then, she bowed. "Precisely. Perfectly. And Earth's disappointment," she added, rising, "tends to be productive." Outside the chamber, in the long corridor known as the Arch of Voices, Graves walked alone. She carried no datapad. Her mind, after all, was its own war room. A voice broke her thoughts. "Dr. Graves." She stopped. The speaker was Ambassador Trin of the Ishii, an avian race whose people once ruled half the Perseid arm before internal logic caused them to argue themselves into philosophical extinction. He was a relic of an empire that had crumbled under the weight of its own cleverness. "Is it true," he asked, feathers bristling, "that you've activated your pre-war protocols?" Graves smiled softly. "I'm sure I wouldn't know. Earth is still, officially, a peaceful observer." Trin hesitated. "And unofficially?" She tilted her head. "Unofficially, we're extremely disappointed." Her voice was kind. Sympathetic, even. But Trin, for all his race's failings, knew a veiled blade when he saw it. "What is your endgame, human?" She tapped her chin, pretending to think. "Oh. Survival. Justice. And, if there's time left on the schedule, balance." Trin gave a low whistle of nervous respect. "Your people always played the long game. But this?" "We're not playing," she said. "We're remembering." In the spiral-armed black between sectors, ships moved. They weren't called warships. They were named like children's poems: The Distant Shore, First Winter, A Quiet House in Fog. They flew no colors, emitted no IFF, and did not speak. But they saw everything. Supply lines thinned. Repair stations shuttered for inspection. Orbital elevators failed in the middle of diplomatic cargo transfers. No deaths. No damage. Just disruption. A whisper campaign followed. Was it pirates? Rebels? A black market smuggler ring? The only clue, if one could call it that, was a repeated phrase on recovered hull fragments, etched into bulkheads, hidden in engine logs. "We asked for nothing but peace." On Cauldron 3, an opulent planet of silver towers and coral-lit skyways, the Jarek ambassador's estate exploded. Not with a bang, but with silence. Every screen, every door, every security field simply shut off. When the security teams arrived, they found a curious scene. The ambassador, bound to a chair. Alive. Unharmed. And every digital file in the estate, erased. On the floor was a message written in powdered stim coffee. "How polite do you want us to be?" Varus screamed as his advisors listed loss after loss. Ships gone. Schedules collapsed. Trade routes in chaos. War without war. He turned to his intelligence chief. How are they doing this? The analyst, a rodent-like creature with too many degrees and not enough sleep, spoke cautiously. They don't engage directly. They interfere. Observe. Disrupt. No violence, just erasure. Varus seethed. That's not war. That's cowardice. Actually, sir, the analyst swallowed, it's strategic dominance. Varus bared his mandibles. Fine. Then let us show them how real power feels. The Jarek launched a full planetary assault on an outer colony they believed to be human-aligned. They descended in carriers and gunships, weapons drawn, assuming they'd catch terrified settlers and send a message. What they found was nothing. No cities. No people. Just empty fields and quietly humming soil processors. And every single processor was transmitting a signal. A single human voice, pre-recorded. Hello, the voice said. Calm. Cheerful. Polite. We regret your aggression. This was a farming world. You've disrupted our carrot harvest. A pause. No carrots means no stews. A longer pause. We liked stews. And then, just before the signal ended. We have very long memories. And very short recipes. The final message burned into the sky above the retreating Jarek ships. Bring spoons to a gunfight, and we'll still win. Back on Earth within a forest of ice beneath the sea, Caldwell sat before a round table surrounded by generals, scientists, and something that might have once been a diplomat. He wore no uniform. He didn't need to. The Jarek will escalate, he said, sipping soup from a steaming bowl. Their pride outweighs their sense. A younger officer leaned forward. Should we meet force with force? Caldwell shook his head. No. That's their game. Let them scream. Let them throw blades. He gestured to a wall where cascading holograms showed fleet positions, economic flux, political unrest. We dismantle their reality. Quietly. Precisely. A long silence. Then the officer asked, and when they finally see us as a threat? Caldwell placed his spoon down. Then we teach them how threats say hello. 3 days later, a Jarek patrol ship went off course near the Helix Rift. Inside, the crew found themselves boarded not by soldiers, but by 3 humans in mining uniforms. They didn't shoot. Didn't even speak. They walked through the ship, scanning systems, disabling power relays, and left. On the bridge's main screen, they left one line. We came bearing flowers. You sent knives. Now we return with gardening tools. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. It was rare. More than rare. Unheard of. Even the Ghost Empires sent representatives. Dr. Graves stood once more at the center of the spiral floor. We warned you, she said simply. We begged. We explained. We used every word in your languages. We used smiles. Politeness. Patience. She turned slowly, facing each tier. And you murdered our envoy. The moderator, nervous beyond containment, croaked out. Then what is it Earth demands now? She looked up. And smiled. But this time it wasn't gentle. Nothing. Confused murmurs echoed. We demanded something once. You declined. This is what comes after. Varus stood, trembling. You would threaten the entire council? Graves met his gaze. We would remind the council that the only thing scarier than a human with a weapon is a human who waited too long to use one. In the Jarek Throneworld's capital, the skyline flickered. Holograms replaced every advertisement. Streets shut down. Civilians looked skyward. One image appeared. Elias Caldwell. Alive. Smiling. Hello again, his voice said. Surprised? His face flickered. I've been watching. Another flicker. Listening. He raised a glass. To the Galactic Empire. May it rest in pieces. And then everything went black. The planetary grid collapsed. Graves walked alone down the corridor again. The arch of voices was quiet this time. Ambassador Trin approached cautiously. "I assume," he said, "we've passed the point of negotiations." Graves smiled, tired now. Almost sad. "We tried diplomacy. They gave us death." Trin sighed. "What will you give us?" She looked up, eyes soft as frost. "A choice." The thing about humans, Karash reflected, was that they always smiled before the blade came. He'd studied their history obsessively over the last 3 cycles, ever since the Jarek Empire executed the man they thought was just a talking monkey in a suit. Since then, things had unraveled with terrifying elegance. Trade collapsed. Fleet patterns scrambled. Intel webs short-circuited. Not because of an army, but because Earth had apparently written the script for the war years before it began. And he, once the Jarek's most decorated tactician, had missed it all. Karash watched another replay of the intercepted human broadcast, one that had hijacked their capital city's comm network with the calm, cultured face of Elias Caldwell. Alive. Smiling. A diplomatic corpse returned from the void. "This is not a declaration," Caldwell had said in that honey-dipped tone. "Declarations are formal. This is a reaction. And reactions are personal." The screen froze on Caldwell's expression. Teeth. Not fury. Not rage. Teeth. Karash shuddered. It was time, he thought, to stop underestimating the grinning predators. Across the stars, Earth was done whispering. Ships with names like Considerate Silence and the weather today is fire entered warp lanes. Their exteriors were non-reflective, their heat signatures ghosted by layered field shielding. They did not respond to hails. They did not ask for clearance. They arrived at critical junction points in Jarek territory, and began folding spacetime in ways that gravity well regulators weren't built to handle. Stargates collapsed into themselves. Fuel reserves were rerouted, then detonated remotely. Supply depots rewrote their own AI priorities and jettisoned their cargo into dead space. Nothing was targeted directly. Everything just stopped working. And the galaxy finally realized. Humanity hadn't come to fight them head-on. They'd come to erase their war from the board. Graves received the casualty report over dinner. No humans lost. No combat reported. 5 Jarek fleet elements incapacitated, without a single shot fired. She sipped her wine and tapped the report twice to archive it. Her aide, a wiry man with too many earrings and a sense of humor so dry it threatened drought, entered with a raised brow. "Jarek are demanding a formal conference." Again. Graves didn't look up. "And we declined." Again. Their escalating rhetoric. Words like retaliation, sovereignty, and the classic, annihilation. She glanced up now. Good. They're running out of vocabulary. "And if they move ships?" "They won't." The aide hesitated. "You're certain?" "I'm hopeful," she said, setting her wine down. "That they're still afraid to discover how much worse it can get." A pause. "If they're not," she added, "then I suppose it's time to test the fireworks." High Talon Varus did not believe in fear. He believed in precision, in order, in dominion through overwhelming control. But as his advisors chattered around him in the war chamber aboard the Jarek Eternal, even he felt the phantom ache of uncertainty threading its way through his core. "We must strike the human core colonies," one general barked. "They can't possibly defend all of them." "They won't need to," Karash replied, stepping forward at last. Varus narrowed his eyes. "Explain." Karash pulled up a galactic overlay. Systems began to vanish, blinking out in real time. Not destroyed. Not attacked. Just silenced. "This isn't conquest," Karash said. "It's strategy on a scale we've never even practiced against. They're not killing us. They're removing us." Varus slammed a clawed fist onto the table. "Then we force their hand." "No," Karash growled. "We already did. And it's still clenched." He turned the display to a classified file, one decrypted only an hour ago. Earth's War Doctrine. Or rather, one tiny excerpt of it. Operation Mirror Box. One sentence glowed across the briefing screen. Never let the enemy see your weapons until they're praying for your negotiations. Varus was quiet for a long time. Then, almost bitterly, "And if we go for their capital?" "You'll never reach it," Karash whispered. "And even if you do, what you find won't be Earth. It'll be a reflection." On a remote moon with no official designation, 6 Jarek saboteurs were sent to intercept what intelligence believed to be a civilian logistics point, supplying human ops. They landed with stealth rigs and cloaking packs. What they found was a barn. Wooden. With wind chimes. No sensors. No energy shields. Just cows. Actual cows. And a man in overalls painting a fence. The leader of the saboteurs stepped forward. "We demand your surrender and data codes." The man wiped his hands on a rag, turned, and said in a thick rural accent, "You boys sure you're in the right place?" The Jarek leader repeated his demand, activating his shock rifle. The human raised a brow. "Well, I guess it's that kind of visit." He whistled. And the cows exploded. Not literally. But what stood in their place weren't cows anymore. They were combat drones, disguised in bioframes, programmed with the entire Jarek infantry combat doctrine. The saboteurs died in 12 seconds. The last thing the leader saw was the man in overalls, standing with a mug of coffee, shaking his head. "You came all this way for a fence." Graves stood in orbit above that same moon, watching through surveillance feeds. She turned to her companion, a silent man in a pressed navy coat with eyes like black stone. "Send the message," she said. He nodded. To the Jarek fleet, a signal arrived. "Don't worry. We'll rebuild the fence." Meanwhile, Caldwell moved among the stars. He no longer used his name. Now he was known only in encoded whispernets. The mirror. The answer that smiles back. He walked through the gala of a minor neutral world, dressed in formal wear, wine in hand, speaking softly to a dozen species. Charming. Harmless. Until he handed an innocent young ambassador a small silver card. And 2 days later, that ambassador revealed the location of a Jarek listening post, disguised as a peace monastery. When Caldwell vanished, the only trace left behind was a napkin. On it was written, "Diplomacy is the art of letting someone else think they chose death." The Jarek Empire launched a direct strike. It was desperate, clumsy but loud. 3 dreadnoughts barreled toward Earth's frontier stations, teeth bared. They were met not by fleets, not by force, but by silence. Midway through warp, every dreadnought lost its navigational AI. And the last image they saw was of Elias Caldwell, projected inside their bridge screens, raising a glass. "Gentlemen," he said, "you're early. The war doesn't start until you admit we already won." The dreadnoughts collided into a dead star and vanished. Karash stood alone now in a war room that felt less like a command center, and more like a shrine to failure. "They knew," he whispered to no one. "They knew everything." A voice responded behind him. "Yes." He turned, claws extended. But it was not an enemy. It was Graves. And she was already sitting in his chair. Karash froze. "This is your capital," he said. "You're trespassing." She poured herself tea. "We were invited." "By who?" "By consequence." He stared. "You came alone?" Graves looked amused. "Oh dear. You think I'm here?" And the world went black. When Karash woke, everything was intact. Except the fleet outside his window. It was gone. Every ship in orbit vanished. Not destroyed. Stolen. Their transponders now pinged from the edge of Earth territory. And the message left behind? "You drew blood. We drew blueprints. Then built better weapons." The Galactic Council convened once more. This time, the mood was grim. Not because of war, but because Earth had not made demands. And in the absence of demands, all that remained was fear. Graves stood at the podium again. She didn't raise her voice. "Today is not a victory speech," she said. "Because victory implies this was ever a contest." A slow scan of the room. Even Varus was silent. "You killed a diplomat," she continued, "and expected a protest. She turned slightly. You got a mirror. Her final words were calm, but the silence that followed them would haunt history. You thought you were drawing blood. A pause. But we were writing history. Elias Caldwell stood in the observation room of the Warden's Mercy, a ship so deeply classified, even the Council's most invasive intelligence networks labeled it allegorical. Beneath him stretched the shattered glow of the Jarek homeworld's orbital perimeter. Fragments of broken defense satellites spun in slow, beautiful arcs. They haven't fired, murmured the junior operative beside him. They won't, Caldwell replied without looking. Not yet. There's still one move they believe they can make. He pressed a gloved fingertip to the transparent wall. Hope. The operative hesitated. Hope for what? Caldwell turned now, softly. That we're bluffing. The operative didn't answer. She didn't need to. Behind them, thousands of kilometers of strategic projections shifted color, red systems blinking out one by one as Earth's disruption fleets closed the last circuits of the invisible noose. They had come not with guns, but with absence. No heroic charges. No declarations. Just subtraction. And now, the Jarek Empire had nothing left to scream through but pride. It would be enough, for one last, glorious mistake. In the Jarek High Throne Chamber, High Talon Varus paced. He was alone now. His advisors had stopped speaking days ago. Some defected. Some disappeared. A few simply curled inward into ritual silence, unable to speak after watching entire sectors blink out of existence without a single recorded blast. Karash had vanished too. Whether taken, defected, or fallen, Varus didn't care. There was no one left to strategize. Only him. And his shame. A transmission flickered in front of him. Dr. Helena Graves. Composed. Unhurried. Wearing a new brooch shaped like a ticking clock. I thought we'd speak, she said softly. Varus bared his teeth. You have crushed systems, stolen fleets, and broken alliances. And now you speak. I always spoke, Graves said. You just never listened. Varus slammed a hand against the console. What do you want? Say it. A throne? Submission? Your own seat on the council. She stared. Calm as sunrise. No. Then what? He roared. Graves leaned forward. Understanding. Varus laughed. It was cracked and hollow. You kill billions and call it teaching? She didn't smile. We did not kill them, she said. They are alive. But their power, the thing you thought untouchable, was based on fear. We only took that away. Varus's claws dug into the console's edge. You cannot erase us. No, she said. You will erase yourselves, trying to make us play by your rules. Then the screen cut. And Varus, shaking, gave the final order. Initiate Protocol Throatblade. The last of the Jarek dreadnoughts launched from the fractured orbital shipyards, 12 deep-core ships with ancient wrath in their engines. Each one programmed to jump directly to Earth's moon. A final, devastating gambit. If they could not win, they would remind humanity what loss tasted like. What they did not realize was that Earth was already waiting, on the other side of the jump. As the first dreadnought exited warp, it found itself surrounded, not by ships, but by emptiness. All navigation data blanked. All systems jammed. And in that black void, on every screen aboard every ship, a single line appeared. You arrived early. The war already ended. The screens flickered once more. Elias Caldwell appeared, older now, the gray in his beard forming deliberate streaks. His voice was measured, professional. Your ships will not be destroyed. Your crew will not be harmed. He stepped back to reveal something behind him. A galaxy-spanning record of every sabotage, every data theft, every contingency Earth had predicted and pre-written before a single shot was fired. He gestured to it. We beat you, he said. Not with guns. But with history. You wrote your own downfall long before we added a footnote. Then the transmissions ended. The dreadnoughts powered down, systems quietly overridden. And one by one they were towed, by automated tugs, reprogrammed from within, to Earth's outer belt. There, they were refitted. Not for war, but as memorial museums. Inside the council, silence reigned. The galactic chair, once an untouchable symbol of order, was empty. Ambassador after ambassador refused to sit in it. Not out of protest, but out of recognition. The council had no authority left. Because when Earth was underestimated, when they were mocked as infants with microphones, they had watched, learned, documented. And when the killing of Elias Caldwell, a diplomat by name, a tactician by birth, was streamed across galaxies, Earth had simply adjusted the timetable. The war had never been about dominance. It was about introducing themselves properly. Now, no one mistook the human smile for submission again. Helena Graves walked the spiral corridors of the ruined council tower alone. Not as a threat. Not as a conqueror. But as an echo. On the walls were holographic projections, news feeds, testimonials, intercepted messages from once proud empires now too stunned to rise. They displayed fear, yes, but also something more dangerous. Curiosity. Because now, the question wasn't how the humans had done it. It was what else they had planned. Graves stood before the Grand Council's shattered dais. She placed a data crystal on the edge, no fanfare, no speech. And then she whispered, "We told you we liked peace." In a mountainside facility on Earth, covered in snow and wild silence, Caldwell sat at a table with a young cadet across from him. She was trembling. He poured her tea. "Tell me what you learned," he said gently. She hesitated. "We don't start wars." "Go on." She swallowed. "We prepare them." He nodded once. "And then?" "We wait." He smiled. Not cruel. Not triumphant. Proud. "Exactly." He leaned back in the chair, the old wood creaking slightly. "You know why we don't scream when attacked?" he asked. She shook her head. "Because screaming tells them they hurt you." He raised the cup. "We smile. Then we bury them in the silence." Karash opened his eyes in a small, windowless cell on a neutral station drifting between systems. He had not been captured. He had requested asylum. No one knew why. No one asked. All that mattered was that he was the first High Jarek to say one word into a recorder. Surrender. When asked what changed his mind, he gave no answer. Just an old napkin. It read, "Politeness is tactical." Helena Graves stood at the edge of a crowd on Dorinth 9, a planet that had never known war. Children ran between her legs, chasing after floating drones, while vendors called out prices in 6 languages. Music filled the air. Beside her, the Silurian Archon, once skeptical, now silent, watched the same scene unfold. "You could have burned the galaxy," he said quietly. "We could have," Graves replied. "Why didn't you?" She looked out over the peaceful square. "Because we remember what it means to rebuild." She sipped from her cup, then added softly, "And because we have better things to do." A beat. "But don't mistake that for mercy." The Archon gave a dry, thin smile. "No. I think we finally understand." On the farthest edge of explored space, Earth's black archive ships moved slowly. No fanfare. No weapons drawn. Just clean up. Galactic files. Political records. The memories of a war fought with silence and precision. One archivist, cataloging intercepted Jarek communications, paused at a single audio snippet. It was Elias Caldwell's voice, from before his death. He said, "If they ever kill me, don't retaliate." A pause. "Make them regret it." Another pause. And then, rebuild. Not for revenge. For rhythm. The archivist tilted his head. What rhythm? But the message ended. And in deep space, where stars listen but never speak, Earth continued to build. Not for conquest, but for the next misunderstanding. In a quiet field on Earth, surrounded by forget-me-nots and gray stones, a plaque stood alone. It read, "Here lies the smile they mistook for surrender." Beneath it, a single line etched in weatherproof steel. "We asked politely. That was your last warning.